Mother took my hand. We walked across the road. I was 5.5 years old and starting school. It was exciting and scary.
The school day began with the ringing of the handbell, and it was a privilege to ring the bell.
They started usually about 9 o'clock, as I remember, because they wanted daylight to come up because the windows provided all the light.
I remember a lot about the one-room schoolhouse because I started my educational program in one.
We wouldn't start school until 9 in the morning, making sure the light was up. If you look at a map that we've got of the placement of schoolhouses, they are roughly 5 miles apart. So that would say that any one student wouldn't walk more than 2.5 miles one way.
I was a rural student and lived in a community where we had a little school and it was 2.5 miles away, and there was no transportation. You rode your bicycle.
We rode our bicycles whenever the weather was right.
We lived on a farm about 1.5 miles from the school, and we had to walk.
I kind of enjoyed that part of the day because during the summer, I'd be walking back and forth to school, and I'd stop and pop tar bubbles for entertainment.
One thing, Hank Willett had a bad dog. He was always after me when I rode the bicycle. He bit me in the leg a couple times. He waited on me in the morning and I had to pedal up that hill. I couldn't get away from him. At night I could go like the Dickens.
But in the wintertime, our father would take us to the horse and sleigh.
I had a pair of snowshoes that I could wear, and we did use them.
The wintertime, getting to and from, often we would cross-country ski. And the more snow, the better. Because the barbed wire on the fences when you're cross-country would be a problem unless you have adequate snow to sail right over the top barbed wire.
There were no school buses at the time, and we walked through deep snow. The roads were not open, and we would sit on chunks of wood around the stove so that our stockings would dry, our black stockings, and you could see the steam rising as our stockings were drying. The fronts of our bodies were warm, but our backs were cold.
There was no electricity, no running water, no indoor plumbing, and so there was an outhouse associated with the schoolhouses, no centralized heat.
We had, I think, like a bucket stove type of thing, barrel type of stove.
And the farmers would bring a load of wood in the early fall, probably August.
And they had a little wood shed out there, and then we'd bring the wood in and heat with wood.
And I was a fire builder. I was 7 years old and was offered 10 cents a morning to build fires a half an hour before the other children got there so the school would be warm.
The stove was located in the center of the room so that all students had a chance of getting some heat. But the actual chimney was in the backside. So between the stove and where it went up through the ceiling, the pipe was giving off the heat before it left the building. So it was efficiency that they were striving for. In terms of heat, the teacher's desk did not have a vanity panel. And the reason for that is she wanted her share of heat to come in. So she's not sitting there with cold legs and feet.
One time it was just terribly cold. It was below zero. And I walked to school and I was just about frozen when I got there. But we always had a fire in that pot-bellied stove in all the school. And it was warm in the school, but I was frozen.
The only control one had once the fire was stoked was a trap door in the ceiling with a rope on it. And you would simply pull that, open the trap door, and let the heat escape. That was the extent of controlling the heat. In terms of controlling cooling, the only option you had was to open the window. And with a lot of windows, you would get cross ventilation. So that's how the teacher dealt with that. Once we got into the schoolhouse in the morning, The first order of business was Pledge of Allegiance.
I'm sure we had the Pledge of Allegiance, but then she would start, okay, the first grade kids, she told them what to do, and then she'd go over the second grade and tell them what to do, and the third grade and fourth, and went up to 8th grade. Then she'd kind of just go back and forth amongst all of us.
One-room schoolhouses, their charter was to educate students in grades 1 through 8. The number of students in a respective grade level, I don't think it ever exceeded 3. But the number of students within the schoolhouse probably didn't exceed 18 or 20.
Yeah, there were 8 grades there. I started there in first grade and went to third grade. Then I came to North Commons and went to fourth grade.
If you think about the average attendance, those students can fit in a number of grade levels. In my case, for example, they looked at me and said, he's only 4, but we have 2 students that are 5, so we need to start a first grade. But to avoid having another first grade for me next year, they said, well, we're going to throw him in with the 2 5-year-olds.
I started first grade, but they moved me right up to second grade because there were no other first grades.
The teacher had to accommodate, the various grade levels, and she could have as many as 15, 18 students at one time. The way she would conduct the education was that she would pull certain grade levels to come up to recitation desks, and then she would give them the lesson, then send them back with homework and things to do.
Well, when I called for the first grade to come, or the second grade, they'd come to the row of seats right by the teacher's desk, and they'd come down and sit in those seats. And then when their class was over and it was time for another class, they'd go back in their seats, and then the other ones would come and sit in front.
So the big challenge for teachers was how to develop curriculums and administer the curriculums to possibly as many as 8 different grade levels.
They'd have certain pages of math to do, or social studies, or reading lessons. That would be the days of Dick and Jane, and some of them worked at the board, and so I could see what they were doing, even if I was having a class over here.
We were learning to write, and we might have assignments. We usually had it done, but I like to listen to the older ones that were having their discussion time at the front desk. I just like to listen to them talk because they were older and they were headed for 8th grade.
You see, in a one-room schoolhouse, you sit there and you hear the classes of other grades so that you absorb a little more than you might ordinarily absorb if you just were programmed for the particular grade in which you were located.
In my position there, I was able to listen to all the other lessons that were being given and still manage to complete my own work.
The lower grade levels would hear the lesson repeatedly, year after year, and I always equate that to the advanced placement programs that you see in the education system today. And there were times when students would jump a grade or 2 due to the fact that students knew the material very, very well, having heard it over and over again.
In my case, I made the 8 years in 6 years because I heard what the older students were learning, and so it was to my advantage, and I tried my regents at the end of 7th grade, so then I went right to high school, so I made it in 6 years.
Yeah, I skipped a couple of grades in the elementary school, so I graduated from the high school at age 15.
In the one-room environment, the teacher was spread pretty thin, and so one of the things that helped her was that the older students would work with the younger students when they had academic issues.
They all helped each other. They read to each other. And sometimes the older ones would read with the first graders. If a child was having trouble with his homework, well, the older ones would come over to sit with him and help him.
Many of the teachers had some tremendous challenges to define a lesson program for the day when she could have as many as 8 different grade levels.
We taught the 3rd and 4th grade together, 5th and 6th together, 7th and 8th together in geography, history, science, and English.
She had her lesson plan, so she would just simply call a grade level up, and often using her blackboard, she would teach the lesson.
And then we had a bench like in the front of the room. And when I had third grade, the third graders would come up and sit on that bench, and I would teach them. Then when I'd get through with the third grade, they'd go back to their seats, and then maybe fourth grade would come on. And of course, it would be different arithmetic and reading.
The teacher had certain teaching aids. She had pull-down maps. She had around the top the alphabet in both printed form as well as cursive. So we had examples all around the ceiling. Some of the pull-down maps had the history of the development of United States. They would show cattle trails, railroad trails, and they would show the development of the states, because some of the maps show states before they were part of the Union. We were taught about how this country was formed, so they indeed taught history. One of the things you'll find in every schoolhouse is a picture of George Washington and Abraham Lincoln. There was just tremendous patriotism in that era. Teachers were given a lot of liberty in terms of what they taught. And what they often taught was what was needed during that era. For example, how to calculate interest. Farmers often wanted that expertise and expected their children to get that education. The farmers clearly affected the attendance at a one-room schoolhouse, because when it came to planting time on the farm, the student had to plant, and therefore they could not attend classes for the full year, and they would come back the next year.
I would suspect that a lot of them never even went beyond the 8th grade. But that changed as the economy changed.
The parents understood the importance of education. And they were adamant that if you didn't get it last year, you're going back the next year. So some of the students in the one-room schoolhouses could be 18 years old, even working their way up through 8th grade.
We had good books because we had a really good curriculum for the country school. We had books because the taxpayers had to furnish everything.
The budgets were very, very tight. They would buy books. It wouldn't be multiple books. So there'd be one book that the trustee would authorize purchase, and she had to do her best with that.
There would be a school meeting to elect a trustee, and he did the business of running the school, and the tax collector collected the taxes and paid the bills, and the teacher would be paid once a month. A check was written by the tax collector.
So that's kind of how the administration worked. It was a district. They raised their tax money. They paid the bills once a year. They had their own school board meeting. The minutes would be on one page. It's how many cord of wood do we order and buy? What do we pay the teacher? How much do we pay for books? End of meeting. They appointed a trustee that was the point person. That person had to worry about buying books, hiring a teacher, taking care of the facility, and make sure that they were helping the teacher. So the administration of the district was done in that fashion. Teachers in those days, they had to be everything. They had to be the nurse. They have to be the music teacher. We had a piano in the back of the room, and there could be singing, and that teacher also had to be the sports director.
Usually between 9 and 12, we'd have just a short 15-minute recess so we could get outdoors and play ball for a few minutes and then come back in.
The recess served as the gym as we would know it today, but it also had the benefit of keeping the students healthy and active. The teachers would often be playing softball with the students.
They brought their own bats and balls and played baseball. Of course, the students would always want the teacher on their side, even though she wasn't a good ball player.
Recess, we broke fast for that. Usually it was a softball game. We played Hilly over or Annie over the schoolhouse.
They played Andy over, where they threw the ball over the roof.
During the winter, it was all sorts of winter-type games.
In the wintertime, there was a creek that was frozen, and the boys would bring their sleds, and we'd jump on and ride piggyback. We played fox and geese.
So that's how they dealt with physical activity. They would get us out and doing something. Take your mind off the academics. The history of education within this building started in 1857, and the last class was taught in 1950, and that's 93 years. There were 93 different graduating classes, and there were some very successful people that came out of one-room schoolhouses. Many successful farmers got their education, got their start, got their math, got everything in a one-room schoolhouse. Others went on to high school, and they were transported either to North Counds or Wanda High School. One of my classmates went on and became principal of a high school. Another person that went through a one-room schoolhouse went on to be a professor at University of Buffalo. Still another went on to be a professor at Purdue. One went on to become a veterinarian. One went on to form a nuclear engineering company out in Tulsa. One went on, I know of, that got an electrical engineering degree and ended up president of a high-tech company in Boston. So the list is quite long of people that started their education in a one-room schoolhouse. A lot of teachers went through one-room schoolhouses and were very good at what they did. As a matter of fact, in terms of discipline, I don't remember anyone being disciplined by the teacher. There was the utmost respect. They were truly dedicated people. They were focused and dedicated on educating students. That's the common thread.
The teachers, they had time to talk to you, care about you, and all that stuff.
And I love the kids, and they all liked each other. They were brothers and sisters and neighbors, and they all knew each other, and they liked each other.
We were like a close-knit family, and I think they had a great deal of respect for me. I showed love for them.
Well, I think that we were pretty close-knit people at the time. More like a big family, you know. Now, you knew everybody, and everybody was friends.
I always felt that the time in the one-room school was a real learning experience, and something that not everyone had.
I think that probably out of that whole scenario came people that were more understanding, probably carried those characteristics throughout their life, as a matter of fact. It prepared us whether we wanted to go on to further education, or if we wanted to start working on the farm and operate a very successful farm, as a lot of people have done in this community. But on the other side of the slate, people went on for further education and did extremely well out in the world.